Hello everyone, Mrs. Bilo here. So in this video, I'm going to be going over what I call picket fences. Now, there's other names for this, but we just call it, here at St. Francis, we just call it a picket fence because that's how it looks when you set it up. So these are basically this is a method or a skill for converting between different units. So different base units. So earlier in the last video, I was going over how to convert between the same base units. So let's say centimeters to micrometers, for example. Both of them we're talking about meters as the base unit, okay? But what happens when you're in a situation where, you know, maybe you are traveling or something and you're in a different country and, you know, they don't use the same units. You know, a lot of other countries, they use kilometers versus here we use miles. So how can we convert between those, okay? Without having to memorize, like, well, do I multiply or divide, okay? Or if I'm trying to go from one crazy base unit to another crazy base unit. So with the picket fence method, I will be providing you equalities. So what equals what? So for example, most of these, if you don't know what they are intuitively, I will provide them to you. Most of you know there are 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, 70 days in a week, 365 days in a year, 24 hours in a day. However, some that you might not be as familiar with, I would provide to you. 1 inch equals 2.54 centimeters. Most of us know 12 inches in a foot, 3 feet in a yard. And this is one that probably a lot of you don't know. 1 kilogram equals 2.2 pounds. So this kind of looks a little crazy right here, but here's kind of the general breakdown. So with your picket fence, you can see in black here, okay? That's like kind of the picket fence, right? Like a picket, that's why we call it a picket fence, okay? And right here, you're always going to start with what you are given. What is it you are trying to convert? And I'm going to go over in word problems how to make sure you know exactly what that is, okay? Whatever it is you're trying to convert, okay? You're trying to convert this number with a unit into some other unit, okay? Maybe it's you're somewhere and, you know, you're trying to figure out, okay, well, they're measuring this in kilometers, but about how many miles is that? How can I do that conversion? One of the main things you want to remember is anytime you're writing, you're going to be writing in numbers in these spaces. Okay, like a number will be here, a number will be here, a number will be here. You want to make sure that you always include units in every single step. This is really crucial next year, especially in chemistry, including units in steps. So make sure you're always writing units down. And then, so you're starting here with something that I'm giving you that you're trying to convert. And then what you're going to be filling in here is going to be some type of equality. It's going to be one of these guys, okay? And ultimately what you want, this is like a giant, almost like division multiplication. You're going to ultimately you're going to multiply everything in the top, multiply everything in the bottom, and then you're going to divide. So ultimately you want units to cancel out in the top and bottom. So you can see here in red, I have those units are going to be the same. Because in math, for example, if you had like, I don't know, like 2 over 2, like that cancels and that gives you 1. It's the same thing with units. Like if you have centimeters over centimeters, those are going to cancel each other out, okay? So we're going to be applying that idea in our picket fence. I do have a list of steps here that you could just refer back to if you need some help, but I'm not going to go over this in the video. And with your calculator, please make sure you have a calculator Having one of these is great. You're going to need one of these next year for chemistry anyway. Please bring your calculator. If you're in a pinch and we're doing stuff in class, you can use the calculator on your computer. However, I just recommend getting one of these. It's so much easier. And kind of our rule of thumb is just round 2 decimal places, so 2 places after the decimal. So for example, if I have 125.361, for example, well, 2 decimal places is 2 places after the decimal. So you want to look at that third decimal place, and if it's 0 to 4, then you just leave this number as is. But if this number is 5 and up, 5 to 9, then you are going to round up. So, for example, I would round this number to just 120.56. But if, let's say, for my answer, there was like a 7 here, I would round the 6 then up to a 7, okay? So if you have questions on rounding, just come talk to me if you need a little bit more of a refresher on that. All right, so we're going to start with some basic picket fences here. All right, so these are really simple ones. I'm just saying convert this into this, or how many of this are in this. So these ones are pretty straightforward because in each of these problems, I'm only giving you one number to deal with. So you know that that's what you're going to start with, okay? And you're going to be plugging in these equalities. Later, when we get to some other more wordier problems, there are going to be other numbers, and I'm going to show you how to figure out, okay, well, how do I know which one to start with? That's probably one of the things where a lot of students struggle, and I'll get to that. But let's start with some simple ones. So let's say so the only number that was given to me in the problem was 34.5 inches. So this is what I'm going to start my picket fence with. We start with it in the upper left corner here, and then we just draw this part of our fence. And you can always, as we're going, we're going to start with this, and then as we go, we can always add on more pieces. But for now, we're just going to start with this. You never have to write anything in the bottom. Just leave it empty. You don't have to write anything there. So in this problem, I was only given one number, and this is what I need to convert. So this is what I'm starting with, 34.5 inches. And I need to convert that into centimeters, okay? So I'm going to need an equality. I'm going to need something to convert inches into centimeters. And a lot of you are probably thinking, well, if 1 inch equals 2.54 centimeters, then I just have to multiply this by 2.54. And you are correct, okay? That is correct. But I'm using this simple example to show you how to start a picket fence, because these picket fences will not always be this short where you could just, I can just multiply this by this. Eventually they're going to get a lot longer, and you're not going to be able to do that type of math. Also, this is really important next year for chemistry when we're dealing with much more complex things. So the first thing I always tell students when starting a picket fence is, okay, we start with what it is we're trying to convert. And then always for my next step, I'm always going to go to the bottom here, okay? And I know what unit is going to go here. I know that it's going to be inches. You always want those units to be the same, okay? So that's how it's always going to be. So if you are not sure what to do for your next, do that, okay? All right, I have inches here, so I know inches is going to go here, because ultimately one's in the top, one's in the bottom. They will cancel out with each other, okay? So always do that as your next step. Now okay, I have that unit. What number is going to go here? Now, when you start plugging into the different parts of your picket fence, what you're going to be plugging in is these guys. Something equals something, okay? So if I'm looking at my equality here, it says 1 inch, okay? So I know that I'm going to put 1 here. This is where I got the 1 from, okay? is from that equality. So I'm using this, okay, and we use this part of it. Now, whatever goes above this, these two have to be equal to each other, okay? So if you are ever writing something here and here, they better be equal to each other, okay? So that means above it, I'm going to put 2.54 centimeters, okay? And you know you're done with a picket fence when all the units cancel besides what you want your answer in. So it's top and bottom, right? We have inches over inches. It's like I said, when you had like 2 over 2, that cancels and gives you 1. We're doing the same thing. Ultimately, we have inches in the top and we will have inches in the bottom. So those cancel each other out. And the only unit that didn't cancel out was centimeters. And that's what we wanted the answer in. Now, mathematically speaking, how to solve for this is you're gonna, if some of you might know order of operations, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. So you want to do multiplication first. So we would do, I'm going to do this in my calculator because you can see this. So we're going to multiply everything in the top. So I'm going to do 34.5 times 2.54. So that's 87.63. So I'm going to write that as my top number. And then we're going to multiply everything in the bottom, which there's only one number in the bottom, so I'm just going to write 1. So when I go to divide 87.63 divided by 1, I'm still going to get 87.63. Now make sure, again, it's 2 decimal places, which that's what we're getting for our answer anyway, so we don't have to do any rounding. And then the units are what we wanted the answer in, which is centimeters. And most of you could probably have figured that out just by doing the math in your head. However, again, I want you to use this technique because it's never going to be just this easy and they're going to get more complicated, but I wanted to start with a very simple example. All right, let's try another one where we're going to go from hours to seconds. Now, this is, if we're dealing with time, these are things that I would expect you to know what they are in terms of like 60 minutes in an hour, 60 seconds in a minute, etc. So, again, we're starting with the only number that's in here, which is 8.0. I'm going to write HR for hours. And I need to try to convert that into seconds, okay? So, again, we're not using any of these because that doesn't have anything to deal with hours or seconds. These are things that you would intuitively know. So we have hours and seconds. So how am I going to get from hours to seconds? Well, I know 1 hour equals 60 minutes, and I know 1 minute equals 60 seconds. Okay, so those are the two I'm going to use. And there are some shortcuts that you can take with time. I'm just going to show you like not with the shortcuts quite yet. So again, I have hours here. So I know automatically I have to put hours here. Well, how many hours? Okay, now I'm using my equalities. Okay, so 1 hour and whatever that is equal to goes above it. 60 minutes. So I just used this equality here. Hours cancel in the top and bottom. Right now I'm in minutes, but that's not what I want my answer in. I want it in seconds. So if you're not quite in the unit that you want your answer in, you're going to have to continue your picket fence and you repeat the same process. I have minutes here, so I know I have to put minutes here. Okay, according to my equality, 1 minute, and that's equal to 60 seconds. Minutes cancel in the top and the bottom. So again, we would multiply everything in the top. 8 times 60 times 60. And again, in the bottom, it would be 1 times 1, which is just 1. and this would be our final answer. This is how many seconds I would have. And I want you to try the next one on your own.